A 7-foot Apache woman no man could handle, until one quiet cowboy changed everything. The sun rose slowly over the endless plains of Arizona, painting the horizon in shades of gold and orange. The wind whispered across the dry grass, carrying the faint scent of sage and dust. In this harsh land, life was not easy, and only the strong survived. Among the settlers and ranchers who had made this land their home, stories were told about a woman who was unlike anyone else. She was not only tall but unusually strong, a woman who seemed almost larger than life. Her presence commanded attention, and her reputation spread through the towns and ranches far and wide. People said she was 7 feet tall, a height that made others look up to her, both literally and figuratively. Her name was seldom mentioned aloud for fear that speaking it might summon her, or worse, offend her pride. She moved with a confidence that few could match, and her eyes held a sharpness that hinted at both intelligence and determination. Despair. Life had not been kind to her. She was an Apache woman, and her family had been scattered long ago during conflicts with settlers. Her tribe had been forced to move, leaving her to navigate the world on her own. From a young age, she had learned to fend for herself. She hunted small game in the nearby forests, gathered roots and herbs to eat, and tended to livestock that she had taken responsibility for after finding them abandoned or left behind. Every day was a struggle, but it was also a lesson. She learned patience, endurance, and the importance of staying alert. Her size, which often frightened others, was a gift in many ways. Bang! She could carry heavy loads, handle large animals, and defend herself when necessary. But it also isolated her. People admired her from a distance, but feared approaching her. Men in the town avoided her, unsure of how to interact with someone so powerful and imposing. Women sometimes whispered behind her back, unsure whether to be intimidated or impressed. Despite her strength, she often felt a deep loneliness. She had friends among the few children and elders who had remained in the area, but there was a gap in her life that no amount of work could fill. She longed for companionship, for someone who would see beyond her size and recognize the person she was. But each day, as she walked through the town or worked on the ranches, she noticed the hesitation in people's eyes. They treated her like a force of nature, something magnificent but untouchable. Bess. She began to wonder if she would ever find someone who could accept her entirely, someone who could see her strength not as a threat but as part of who she was. Her daily routines were demanding. At dawn, she would wake before the sun fully rose, her long limbs stretching as she prepared for the day. She fed the animals, checking on each one with care. Her hands were calloused from years of labor, but they were also gentle when needed. She knew how to calm a frightened horse, how to guide a stubborn cow, and how to tend to the wounds of an animal without causing it pain. By the time the sun climbed higher, she was ready to take on the more challenging tasks of the day. She would ride out into the fields, sometimes for hours, ensuring that the livestock were safe and the fences intact.
Desperation.
She was respected for her skill, but even respect had its limits. People still kept their distance, unsure if they could handle being near her.
The townsfolk often spoke of her in hushed tones. They shared stories of her feats, sometimes exaggerating them for effect. Some claimed she could wrestle a bull with her bare hands. Others said she could lift objects that 2 or 3 men could not move. Bray. Children listened wide-eyed, unsure whether to be amazed or afraid. The truth was simpler yet impressive. She was incredibly strong, smart, and independent. She had survived in a world that was often hostile, using her wits and her abilities to carve a life for herself. She was not looking for attention or praise, but the admiration, even if quiet, reminded her that she mattered. Yet, even with all her accomplishments, loneliness crept in during the quiet moments. That night, when the chores were done and the animals settled, she would sit by the fire she built herself. The stars stretched endlessly above, and the wind carried the cool night air across the plains. In those moments, she felt the absence of companionship the most. Desperation. She thought about what it would be like to have someone beside her, someone who could understand her struggles and share in her triumphs. She imagined walking through the town without fear of judgment, speaking with someone who treated her as an equal. These thoughts were bittersweet. She had grown used to solitude, but the desire for connection was persistent, quietly pulling at her heart. Her appearance, imposing as it was, also made simple interactions complicated. She could not go unnoticed. No matter how quietly she moved, people stared. Some with admiration, others with uncertainty. Children were often drawn to her, fascinated by her size and strength, but adults were hesitant. Men, in particular, were unsure how to approach her. Many had tried to make jokes or show bravado, only to retreat when they realized she was not intimidated by them. This pattern repeated often enough that she had developed a cautious approach to meeting new people. Trust was difficult to give, and she guarded her heart carefully. Despite the challenges, she remained determined to live fully. She had a strong sense of pride, not only in her abilities but in her heritage. And she carried with her the lessons and stories of her ancestors, the Apache who had lived in these lands for generations. Their resilience flowed through her, giving her strength in moments of doubt. Each task she completed, each problem she solved was a testament to her perseverance and resourcefulness. She did not complain about the long hours, the hard labor, or the isolation. She faced them with a steady resolve, knowing that her life depended on it. Occasionally strangers would visit the town, passing through quickly.
They often gawked at her, whispering among themselves about the giant Apache woman.
She ignored them mostly, knowing that their curiosity was fleeting. They did not understand her life, her struggles, or her dreams. She continued her work, focusing on what mattered, surviving, maintaining her independence, and seeking a sense of belonging that had so far eluded her. One particular morning, as the sun rose with a golden glow, she noticed a group of men attempting to drive a herd of cattle through the plains. The animals were restless, and the men struggled to maintain control. Without hesitation, she mounted her horse and rode toward the chaos. Her presence alone seemed to command attention, and the cattle gradually calmed under her careful guidance. She moved among them with confidence, using gentle yet firm commands. The men watched in awe, realizing that they could not have managed the situation without her. This was not the first time she had saved the day, and it would not be the last. Her skill and composure in moments of crisis had earned her a reputation as someone not to be underestimated. As she rode back to the ranch after the work was done, she felt a mixture of pride and longing. Pride in her abilities and accomplishments, and longing for something more, a connection that went beyond admiration or fear. She wondered if someone would ever see her for who she truly was, someone who would not be intimidated by her strength but would instead appreciate it, respect it, and share in her life. This thought lingered as she returned home, tending to her animals and preparing for the next day, never losing hope that the right person might appear, someone who could understand her world and walk beside her in it. Life continued in this way, the days blending into one another, each filled with hard work, small victories, and quiet moments of reflection. She had learned to embrace her solitude while remaining open to possibilities. The world had not made it easy, but she had adapted, growing stronger and wiser with each challenge. The towering Apache woman remained a figure of fascination and respect, admired yet untouchable in the eyes of most. But deep within her, a spark of hope persisted, waiting for the day when someone might finally meet her strength with understanding and companionship, someone who could change her life in ways she had never imagined. And so, under the vast Arizona sky, she continued her daily routine, balancing strength with grace, independence with a quiet yearning for connection. Despair, She was a woman who could handle anything the world threw at her, yet she remained open to the possibility that life could hold more than survival. There could be friendship, trust, and perhaps even love, a rare gift she had yet to encounter. As the sun dipped lower on the horizon, she gazed toward the distance, unaware that soon a quiet cowboy would arrive, someone who might change everything she had come to expect from life. The quiet plains of Arizona had always been a place where life moved slowly, yet every day brought its own challenges. The towering Apache woman continued her routine with skill and determination, unaware that soon her world would encounter someone different, someone who would not fear her, judge her, or doubt her strength. That person was a cowboy named James. He was a man of few words, soft-spoken and observant. Unlike the other men who had come and gone through the town, he carried himself with calm confidence rather than loud bravado. He had recently taken over a small ranch on the outskirts of town, a modest spread that required constant care. James was known among the townsfolk for his reliability and patience, but he kept to himself, preferring quiet work over gossip and socializing. James's arrival was noted by many, but none watched him as closely as the Apache woman did. She had seen countless men come into town, many trying to impress or intimidate her, only to retreat in confusion or fear. But James was different. The first time she noticed him, he had been helping with a local cattle drive, moving a group of restless animals through a narrow passage near the hills. While other men shouted and waved their arms in panic, James stood calmly, his eyes scanning the situation, his hands steady on the reins of his horse. He did not try to take control in a loud, forceful way. Instead, he observed and waited for the right moment to act. His patience and quiet confidence caught her attention, sparking curiosity in her that she had not felt in years. She watched him handle the cattle with ease, guiding them gently but firmly, never raising his voice unnecessarily. It was a skill that mirrored her own. She had learned over the years that strength without control could lead to disaster, and it seemed James understood this instinctively. While the other men struggled and grumbled, he worked efficiently, anticipating the herd's movements and responding calmly. When a bull broke free from the group, James guided it back with a mixture of authority and careful attention. She realized that he did not fear the animals, and more importantly, he did not fear her. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of respect for a man, and she allowed herself to watch him more closely. Over the next few days, their paths began to cross more frequently. She noticed him at the local general store, selecting supplies for his ranch with careful consideration. She saw him repairing fences on the outskirts, his movements deliberate and methodical. He never boasted about his abilities, nor did he seek attention. He simply went about his work, quiet but competent, and always respectful to those around him. The Apache woman found herself intrigued by his demeanor. She was used to men who either ignored her entirely or treated her as a curiosity. James treated her like a person, and that alone made her pay attention. Their first conversation happened unexpectedly. She had been struggling with a stubborn cow that refused to move into the corral. She had tried everything she knew, but the animal remained obstinate. James happened to be passing by and noticed her struggle. Without hesitation, he rode up and gently guided the cow with calm commands. His voice was low, steady, and unhurried. The cow responded immediately, moving into the corral without a fight. She had never encountered a man who could work alongside her without trying to assert dominance or make her feel small. Bay. She looked at him with a mix of surprise and admiration. "Thank you," she said simply, her voice carrying both relief and curiosity. James nodded, tipping his hat slightly. "No problem. Sometimes they just need someone who stays calm." The Apache woman found herself studying him carefully. bay. He did not seem impressed by her size, nor did he shy away. He treated her as an equal, someone capable and competent, not as a spectacle. That simple respect was more powerful than any words or gestures she had encountered before. She realized that she was not used to men who could match her presence with quiet confidence rather than fear or mockery. In the days that followed, they began to interact more often. Sometimes it was a brief exchange at the market. Other times they worked near each other on the ranches. She noticed that he observed before acting, assessing the situation carefully and responding with skill and patience. He was not boastful, nor was he impatient. He was attentive and aware, qualities she had rarely found in men. Slowly, a silent understanding began to form between them, built on mutual respect rather than words. The Apache woman, who had always been independent, found herself thinking about him more than she expected. She remembered the times when men had tried to impress her with their strength, only to retreat when they realized she could easily match or surpass them. She remembered the jokes, the fear, and the avoidance. But James was different. He did not compete with her. He simply worked alongside her. His presence was calming, not challenging. She began to wonder what it would be like to have someone in her life who did not try to control her or fear her. Someone who could match her in patience and understanding rather than physical strength. One afternoon, a sudden storm rolled across the plains. Dark clouds gathered, and strong winds swept through the town. Livestock scattered, and the townsfolk rushed to secure their animals. The Apache woman, as usual, sprang into action, rounding up animals and guiding them to safety. She was used to handling such situations alone, but she noticed James riding nearby. He was calm and composed, helping to direct the livestock without panicking. Together, though unspoken, they worked in harmony, anticipating each other's movements. The storm raged around them, yet there was a strange sense of order in their teamwork. By the time the worst of the wind passed, most of the animals were safe, and both of them were wet and exhausted, but relieved. After the storm, they shared a brief moment by the corral, drying off and catching their breath. The Apache woman glanced at James, noticing the steady determination in his eyes. "You handle yourself well," she said. James gave a small smile. "I've learned it's better to stay calm. Panicking doesn't help anyone."
She nodded, appreciating his honesty and the simplicity of his words.
Unlike other men, he did not feel the need to exaggerate or impress. His quiet confidence was magnetic in a way she had never experienced. For the first time in a long while, she felt curiosity mixed with something else, a spark of trust. Over the following weeks, their encounters became more frequent. They shared small conversations about the weather, the animals, and the work that needed to be done. Sometimes they exchanged tips about managing the ranches or controlling the livestock. She discovered that James was patient, attentive, and thoughtful. He never rushed her, never tried to take over, and never judged her. He simply observed, learned, and assisted when needed. The Apache woman, who had spent most of her life relying only on herself, began to see the value of having someone beside her, someone who could match her in calm determination. People in the town began to notice the quiet connection forming between them. Some whispered, curious about why the Apache woman, usually solitary and distant, seemed more relaxed when James was around. Others were puzzled that he treated her with respect rather than fear. Neither of them paid much attention to the gossip. They were focused on the work, the land, and the growing understanding between them.
One evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant hills, the Apache woman was finishing chores when she saw James approaching.
He carried tools for repairing a fence, a task she had planned for the following day. Without a word, he offered his assistance. She hesitated for a moment, unused to accepting help, but then nodded. Together they worked side by side, measuring posts, hammering nails, and straightening rails. Their movements were synchronized, unspoken yet effortless. They joked lightly when mistakes were made, laughed at minor accidents, and shared small stories about their pasts. In that moment, she felt a rare sense of companionship, something she had never experienced before. By the time the fence was repaired, the sky was painted with shades of pink and purple. They stood back to admire their work, tired but satisfied. The Apache woman realized that she felt a connection growing, one built not on words or appearances, but on respect, shared effort, and understanding. She had always believed that her size and independence made her unapproachable, but James had proven otherwise. He had entered her world quietly, carefully, and without fear. That night, as she sat by her small fire, she thought about him. But there was something about his patience, his calm demeanor, and his respect for her strength that made her heart feel lighter.
She had faced many challenges alone, and she was proud of her independence.
Yet for the first time she considered the possibility that she did not have to face everything alone. There might be someone who could understand her, who could walk beside her rather than behind or ahead. Someone who could match her strength with quiet courage. The Apache woman did not know what the future held, but she felt a small spark of hope. James had arrived quietly, without fanfare or intention, and yet he had already begun to change the way she saw the world. For the first time in years, she imagined the possibility of trust, friendship, and perhaps more. She knew that her life was about to take a turn she could not yet fully comprehend, but one thing was certain. The quiet cowboy had made an impression, and she was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, someone could truly understand her strength and accept her entirely. Days passed, and the quiet plains of Arizona seemed to shift in subtle ways for both the Apache woman and James. Their interactions, once brief and cautious, began to grow more frequent and comfortable. She noticed him arriving earlier at the fields, or passing by her ranch with supplies or helpful tools.
At first, she had been wary of his attention, unused to someone showing interest without expectation or fear.
But James had a patience that matched her own, a slow, steady approach that respected her independence. One afternoon, as the sun blazed over the endless plains, she was checking the fences along her property line. Some posts had been loosened by recent storms, and a few rails had cracked under the weight of grazing cattle. It was hard work, bending and lifting under the hot sun. She was midway through tightening a post when she heard the soft approach of hooves. James rode up quietly, his hat tilted to shield his eyes from the sun. In his hands, he carried a bundle of spare rails and nails, neatly tied with rope.
"I thought you might need these," he said simply, his voice calm.
She looked at him, slightly surprised, but then nodded with a faint smile. "Thank you."
I have some work to do, but I could use the help. Together, they set to work. Their movements were almost instinctive, a rhythm that did not require words. She held the post steady while he drove the nails. She lifted the heavy rails while he positioned them carefully. Occasionally, a laugh would escape her lips when a nail bent or a piece of wood slipped. Breaths. James chuckled softly too, but never in a way that embarrassed her. The work was hard, the sun relentless, yet neither seemed to mind. Their focus on the task at hand created a silent connection that neither could ignore. During a brief pause, she leaned on her tools, wiping sweat from her brow. "You make this look easier than it is," she said. James shook his head. "It's not easy. You just make it look easy because you know what you're doing." She felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. No one had ever acknowledged her skill like that before. Most people had either feared her strength or tried to undermine it. But James saw it for what it was, hard-earned, real, and necessary. She realized that for the first time she had found someone who could appreciate her abilities without feeling threatened or inferior. Over the following weeks, their routine continued. They would often meet on the plains to check the animals or repair fences. Sometimes they rode together to distant watering holes, sharing the labor and the quiet beauty of the land. James was calm and observant, and she found herself speaking more than she had with anyone in years. She spoke of her life before, the struggles she had faced, and the small victories she had achieved. He listened patiently, never interrupting, never judging. His attentiveness made her feel heard in a way she had longed for but rarely experienced. One evening, after a long day of work, they found themselves riding side by side along a narrow trail that cut through the hills. The sun had begun to dip below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of pink, orange, and deep purple. The air was cool, carrying the scent of sagebrush and earth. Silence stretched between them, comfortable and unforced. She glanced at James, noticing the way his eyes softened in the fading light. He seemed at peace here, connected to the land in a way that resonated with her own instincts. "You ride well," she said, after a moment, breaking the silence. James nodded.
"I've had practice." "But you're something else entirely. I've never seen anyone handle animals like you do."
Bray, she felt a mixture of pride and humility. It's not just strength. You have to understand them. Feel what they need. It's the same with people sometimes. He looked at her thoughtfully. I can see that. And you understand more than most. It shows. There was a pause, filled only by the soft rustle of wind through the grass and the distant call of a hawk. She felt a flutter of something unfamiliar, something that went beyond simple friendship or respect. It was an awareness of connection, of trust, of the possibility that someone could understand her in ways few ever had. James had entered her world quietly, carefully, and without expectation, and she found herself drawn to him more than she had imagined. The following days brought challenges that tested both of them. One morning, a young calf had wandered away from the herd, drawn by the scent of fresh grass near a small ravine. It had fallen partway down the slope and could not climb back up. The Apache woman spotted it from a distance, her instincts immediately kicking in. She raced toward it, her long legs carrying her swiftly across the uneven ground. James, noticing her hurry, followed at a steady pace, offering his assistance. Together they managed to guide the frightened animal back to safety. She realized then that working with him was different from working with anyone else. It did not try to take control. He complimented her, anticipating her movements and responding with care. Later that evening, as they rested near a small fire at her ranch, they shared stories of their childhoods. She spoke of her tribe, her family, and the experiences that had shaped her. James shared bits of his own past, the lessons learned from solitude and the hard work of managing a ranch on his own. They laughed at small mishaps, reflected on hardships, and found comfort in each other's company. It was a quiet, gentle bonding, built on shared effort and understanding.
For the Apache woman, it was a revelation. She had always believed that no man could truly match her strength. But here was someone who did, not by overpowering her, but by understanding her, respecting her, and walking beside her.
Rumors began to spread quietly in town. People noticed the growing bond between the Apache woman and the quiet cowboy. Some were skeptical, questioning why she seemed more relaxed and happy when James was around. Others whispered about the possibility of friendship, or even more, between them. But the pair paid little attention to gossip. Their connection was private, built on shared work, trust, and mutual respect. As the days turned to weeks, The Apache woman began to notice changes in herself. She found that she looked forward to his visits, that she felt lighter in his presence, and that her laughter came more easily. The loneliness that had shadowed her for so long began to lift, replaced by the warmth of companionship. It was not a sudden change, but a steady realization that someone had entered her life who did not fear her, did not challenge her unnecessarily, and most importantly, accepted her fully. One late afternoon, a sudden storm rolled over the plains again. Dark clouds gathered quickly, bringing strong winds and the distant rumble of thunder. The animals grew restless, and the townsfolk hurried to secure their property. The Apache woman sprang into action, rounding up the livestock with practiced efficiency. James arrived shortly after, offering his assistance calmly. Together, they worked in perfect coordination, anticipating each other's movements and managing the animals with skill and patience. By the time the worst of the storm had passed, the livestock were safe, and both were exhausted but relieved. Sitting by a fire to dry off, they shared a quiet moment. The Apache woman looked at James, noticing the way he remained composed even under pressure.
"You're calm in all this," she said.
He smiled faintly. It's better than panicking.
"You taught me that, in a way." She raised an eyebrow, intrigued.
Me? Yeah, he said simply. I've seen how you handle things. It's not just strength, it's thoughtfulness. That's something I've never seen before. Breaths.
Her heart lifted at his words. For the first time, she felt that her abilities and her approach to life were truly seen and appreciated.
It was a powerful feeling, one that strengthened her trust in him. She realized that this was different from anything she had experienced with men before. He did not seek to dominate or impress. He simply observed, respected, and assisted. Over the following days, they continued to work together, building fences, herding cattle, and navigating the challenges of the plains. Each task, each shared moment brought them closer. Their conversations grew more personal, touching on dreams, fears, and hopes for the future. The Apache woman, who had long guarded her heart, began to sense that she could open herself to someone who truly understood her. James had entered her life quietly, without fanfare, but he had already begun to change it. By the time the sun set one evening, painting the horizon with streaks of red and gold, the Apache woman felt something she had not felt in years. Hope bed. She looked at James, riding beside her with steady confidence, and realized that perhaps, just perhaps, someone could handle her strength, not by overpowering her, but by matching it in patience, understanding, and respect. She did not yet know what the future held, but she felt certain that her life was about to change in ways she had never imagined. The days on the plains began to feel different for the Apache woman. The routine she had followed for years, long, solitary hours of work under the sun, was now punctuated by James's quiet presence. Each day she noticed small things about him. The way his eyes tracked the animals with careful attention, the way he paused to consider each action before moving, the calm steadiness in his voice even when the wind whipped fiercely across the plains. Unlike other men, he did not try to impress her with loud words or grand gestures. He simply worked, and he simply noticed. That alone drew her closer, and for the first time in many years, she felt that trust, not fear, could be possible. One late afternoon, a task arose that would deepen their bond. A section of fence along the southern edge of her property had been torn down by recent storms, leaving the livestock dangerously exposed. The Apache woman had already spent hours attempting to repair it alone, but the wind and loose soil made it difficult. She was halfway through lifting a post when she heard the familiar sound of hooves approaching. James arrived, carrying a bundle of sturdy new rails.
He dismounted without a word, his movements careful and unhurried, and began setting them near the broken section.
"I thought we could tackle this together," he said simply.
She studied him for a moment, then nodded.
"All right."
"But it's tricky work." James smiled faintly.
I can handle tricky. Their teamwork began almost silently.
She held post steady while he positioned the rails, measured distances, and hammered nails. Occasionally, they exchanged small practical comments. "Shift it slightly to the left," she would say. "Use your right hand on that nail," he would reply. Mistakes were met with laughter rather than frustration, and when a rail slipped, they leaned together to lift it into place. For hours they worked side by side, sweat on their brows, dust in the air, and the quiet sound of their coordinated effort filling the space between them. As the sun began to dip behind the distant hills, casting long shadows across the land, they finished the repair. Both of them paused, surveying their work. The fence now stood strong and straight, capable of containing the restless livestock. The Apache woman felt a sense of pride, not only in the work itself but in the way they had accomplished it together. She realized how rare it was to find someone who matched her in patience, skill, and understanding. James did not dominate or overtake her. He complemented her, enhancing her own abilities instead of overshadowing them. They sat together on a fallen log, taking a moment to rest. The wind had softened, and the sky was painted with hues of deep orange, pink, and violet. Silence stretched between them, comfortable and unforced. She found herself glancing at him, noticing the subtle features of his face in the warm glow of the sunset. The way his hands were rough from labor but steady and sure. For the first time she felt a stirring of emotion she could not easily name. It was more than admiration or respect. It was a deep awareness that someone could truly see her, understand her, and accept her in her entirety. He glances around in dismay. "You work well," she said softly, breaking the silence. James looked at her and nodded. "So do you. I've seen you handle things I couldn't even imagine handling alone." Recognition and understanding had always been scarce in her life. Many had feared her, some had mocked her, but James seemed to see her fully, without judgment or fear. "It's easier when someone helps," she said quietly. He smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling.
"It's easier when someone trusts you." The Apache woman considered this. She had spent years trusting only herself, relying on her strength and instincts.
Trust had been fragile, tested, and often broken. Yet here was someone who not only accepted her abilities but respected them, someone who trusted her equally in return. For the first time, she realized that vulnerability did not have to be weakness. With James, it could be shared strength. As twilight settled over the plains, they began walking back toward the ranch, side by side. Their conversation became more personal, moving beyond the practicalities of work. She spoke of her past, the hardships she had endured, and the isolation she had felt for so long. He listened attentively, never interrupting, his gaze steady and encouraging. Then he shared his own experiences, his childhood on a small ranch, the lessons he had learned from long days in solitude, and the ways he had come to value patience, observation, and understanding. There was a quiet intimacy in these exchanges, a sense that both of them were being seen and accepted for who they truly were. The Apache woman realized that she had been cautious not just because of fear, but because no one had ever truly understood her before. Now, for the first time, she felt the possibility of companionship, not as a threat to her independence, but as a complement to it. Over the following days, the pair continued to spend time together, but sometimes it was work, repairing fences, herding cattle, or tending to injured animals. Sometimes it was simple conversation as they rode along trails or sat by a fire at dusk. Each interaction deepened their understanding of each other, and small gestures of care began to emerge. He would bring extra water for her on long days, offer to hold tools for her, or quietly support her when lifting heavy posts. She, in turn, shared her knowledge of the land, the animals, and the subtle rhythms of life on the plains. One evening after a particularly long day, they found themselves sitting near the fire at her ranch. The flames flickered, casting shadows across their faces. The Apache woman looked at James, realizing how comfortable she felt in his presence. She did not have to put up walls or hide her thoughts. She could speak openly, and he would listen. She could laugh, and he would laugh with her. She could act strong, and he would respect her strength without fear. "Do you ever feel alone?" he asked softly, breaking the silence. She paused, considering. "I used to. A lot. Bets. But lately, not so much." He nodded, understanding. "It's hard to find someone who truly understands you, but it seems we found each other, in a way." She felt warmth rise in her chest. It was a feeling she had not expected, one that both frightened and comforted her. Trust was growing between them, but it was deeper than she had imagined possible. It was more than friendship. It was the foundation of something lasting. The Apache woman realized that James's presence had begun to change her. She laughed more easily, felt lighter in spirit, and found joy in simple moments. His patience had taught her that strength could coexist with gentleness, that independence could exist alongside companionship. Slowly she allowed herself to imagine a future where she did not face every challenge alone, where someone could walk beside her, not behind her or in fear of her, but truly alongside. By the time the stars appeared overhead, the plains quiet, except for the soft sounds of night creatures. She felt a sense of peace she had rarely known. James had become more than a coworker or acquaintance. He had become someone she could rely on, someone whose understanding and patience had begun to break through the walls she had built around her heart. She did not yet know where this bond would lead, but for the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope. As they sat together by the fire, sharing stories, laughter, and quiet moments of reflection, the Apache woman realized that something in her life was changing. She had always been alone, relying on her own strength to navigate the challenges of the plains. Now she had discovered that someone could match her, not by overpowering her, but by understanding her, supporting her, and walking beside her. But that realization brought a sense of comfort, joy, and anticipation for what the future might hold. And so, under the vast sky filled with stars, the Apache woman and James continued to share the quiet companionship of the plains. Their bond had grown stronger, rooted in respect, shared effort, and understanding. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to imagine a life where she was not alone, a life where someone could truly stand beside her. And in that possibility, she found hope. A hope that would guide the days ahead, as the quiet cowboy began to change everything she had known about trust, connection, and companionship. The plains of Arizona stretched endlessly under the clear morning sky, golden lights spilling over the hills and valleys. The Apache woman rose early, as she always had, tending to the animals with the same strength and care that had earned her respect across the town. But now, each task carried a different feeling. James had become a constant presence in her life, quietly changing the rhythm of her days. She no longer felt the weight of isolation pressing on her shoulders. Instead, a sense of calm companionship accompanied her every step, subtle but unmistakable. James appeared as usual, arriving on his horse with a calm demeanor that had become familiar and reassuring. He carried tools and supplies for the day's work,
But he also carried something else, a quiet confidence and patience that matched her own. She watched him approach, noting the way his eyes met hers without judgment, without fear, only understanding. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen, not as the towering figure that frightened many, but as a person with thoughts, feelings, and hopes.
Good morning, James said softly, tipping his hat in greeting.
She nodded, a small smile touching her lips.
Good morning.
Ready for another busy day? He chuckled lightly. Always. Together they rode across the plains, checking fences, guiding cattle, and ensuring that everything on both their ranches ran smoothly. Their movements were in sync, the kind of unspoken coordination that comes only after days and weeks of shared experience. Each task, from lifting a heavy post to calming a restless animal, became a shared challenge.
Their cooperation was effortless, but it was also deeply meaningful. In every gesture, every glance, they conveyed trust and understanding, building a connection that was stronger than words could describe.
By midday, they stopped near a small creek to rest. The water gurgled softly over smooth stones, and the gentle rustle of trees provided a quiet soundtrack to their brief pause. The Apache woman knelt to drink from the creek, and James joined her, filling a small bucket with water for the animals. For a moment they worked in silence, but the quiet was comfortable, filled with a sense of shared presence rather than emptiness. Bah, you've made this place feel less lonely, she said after a pause, her voice soft. James looked at her, his expression serious, yet kind. I didn't mean to, but I'm glad. You deserve someone who sees you, not just what everyone else thinks you are. Psst, psst, psst. She met his eyes, feeling warmth rise in her chest. It was rare for her to hear words that felt true and not filled with fear, mockery, or expectation. I've been alone for so long, she admitted. I've grown used to it. But
I like having you here. His gaze softened.
I like being here. With you, P. It feels right. The Apache woman felt something shift within her. She had spent years relying on her strength, guarding her heart, and keeping people at a distance. But with James, she felt safe to lower those walls. Trust had become more than a choice. It had become natural. Backed. She realized that strength did not mean being alone. It could mean choosing someone to walk beside her, someone who matched her in patience, respect, and understanding. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of red, orange, and purple, they continued their work. A sudden challenge arose. A young calf had wandered too close to a steep ridge, and it teetered dangerously on the edge. Without hesitation, the Apache woman sprang into action, guiding the animal back to safety with calm commands. James followed, supporting her when the ground was uneven and lending steady hands to help move the frightened creature. Together they ensured the calf's safety without harm. After the task, they both sat on a nearby hill, watching the sun sink lower, casting long shadows across the plains. Their breaths were steady, the air warm from the day's labor. For the first time, the Apache woman realized that her life had changed profoundly. She had found someone who did not fear her, who did not try to control her, and who accepted her fully. The loneliness that had been a constant companion for so long had lifted, replaced by a deep sense of connection and belonging. I never thought I'd find someone who could match me, she said quietly. James turned to her, his eyes calm and sincere.
I don't match you by strength.
I match you by respect. That's what matters, Bear. She smiled, feeling a mix of relief, joy, and gratitude.
I never thought someone could see me like that.
bears. Not just my size or strength, but me.
He nodded, understanding.
Bet. I see you. All of you. From that moment, their bond grew even stronger. They shared more than work. They shared laughter, quiet conversations, and small moments of connection that deepened their understanding of each other. Bay. She began to teach him skills she had learned from years of surviving on the plains. Tracking, reading the land, understanding animal behavior. He, in turn, shared techniques he had perfected on his ranch, his patience and methodical approach complementing her own abilities. Together, they became a team not just in labor, but in life. The townsfolk began to notice the change as well. The Apache woman, who had always been solitary and distant, seemed lighter in spirit. Her laughter reached ears that had never heard it before, and her smile became more frequent. People began to see that James did not intimidate her, nor did he try to control her. He simply accepted her entirely, and she allowed herself to accept him in return. Slowly, the whispers in town shifted from curiosity to admiration. They saw not just a towering Apache woman and a quiet cowboy, but a partnership built on trust, respect, and shared strength. One evening after a long day of work, they sat by the fire at her ranch, the flames casting flickering shadows across their faces. The Apache woman looked at James, noticing how calm and steady he remained even in the soft glow of night. She realized that she had grown to trust him completely, a trust she had never given to anyone else. "I never imagined I could feel like this," she admitted. James reached out and rested a hand briefly on hers. "I'm glad you do."
You deserve it.
That simple gesture carried more weight than either of them could have imagined. It was a promise, a connection, a silent agreement that they would face the world together. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mix of joy, relief, and anticipation. For the first time, she believed that companionship and strength could coexist, that independence did not require solitude, and that love could grow from trust and understanding rather than expectation or fear. Over the following weeks, they continued their life together on the plains. They worked side by side, laughed together, and supported each other through challenges. Harsh weather, difficult animals, and the opinions of townsfolk were no longer obstacles, because they faced everything together. The Apache woman felt a freedom she had never known, the freedom to be herself, fully, without walls, without fear. She had found someone who could handle her, not by overpowering her, but by walking beside her with patience, respect, and love. One morning, as the sun rose in a clear sky, the Apache woman and James rode together across the plains. The animals followed calmly, the fences held strong, and the land seemed alive with possibility. She looked at James, noticing the calm confidence in his eyes, the gentle strength in his movements, and the quiet understanding he carried with him. She realized that her life had changed completely, that the isolation she had once accepted as inevitable was no longer necessary. She had found someone who understood her, supported her, and accepted her fully. As they rode back to the ranch, she felt a sense of peace and contentment she had never known. The towering Apache woman who had once been feared and avoided by all had found her match, not in strength or size, but in patience, respect, and understanding. James had entered her life quietly, without expectation, and had changed everything. She knew that their partnership would face challenges in the days ahead, but she also knew that they could overcome anything together. And so, under the vast Arizona sky, the Apache woman and James continued their life together. Their bond was built on trust, respect, and shared experience, stronger than fear, stronger than isolation. For the first time in years, she felt truly at home. Not in a place, but with someone who could walk beside her, match her spirit, and change her life forever. The lonely plains no longer seemed vast and empty. They were filled with possibility, companionship, and the quiet, enduring strength of two people who had found each other in a world that had once seemed too harsh for connection. In that shared strength and understanding, the Apache woman realized something profound. Life was not about being alone or feared. Life was about finding someone who could accept you, challenge you, and walk beside you. And in James, she had found exactly that. The quiet cowboy had changed everything. He had shown her that strength and vulnerability could coexist, that independence could exist alongside companionship, and that love could grow from respect and understanding, rather than fear or expectation.